This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John
So,
Girardi.
the biggest conservative conference in America has no pro-life speakers at it all of a sudden. And Jonathan and I are going to talk today about the conservative movement and the place of the pro-life movement within it. I think that's fair to say that's probably our topic for today. There's lots of other important pro-life news happening, particularly in the California legislature and places like that.
Red-headed stepchild or reddest-headed stepchild?
Yeah. So anyway, I talked about this a little bit earlier in the week on the John Girardi show, but I want to dig into it today. So some of you may have heard of CPAC. Okay, the Conservative Political Action Committee. Conference, excuse me.
It's run by the American Conservative Union.
The American Conservative Union, okay.
Which doesn't sound like a fake made-up organization at all.
Right. So, CPAC is basically this entity that... So, it's this big conservative conference, and it's become very, very prominent, I'd say... I think it's really gained in its prominence over the last 10 years and maybe even just over the last 5 or 6 years, especially. It's this really big event. Where have they traditionally held it, John? It used to be held in Washington, D.C. most of the time, but now it's in Florida.
Yes. Well, and the reason for that is, I mean, just historically, it's been in D.C., and historically, it's always been this thing that kind of skews a little bit more libertarian. Mm-hmm. But it's also very conservative. And by skews libertarian, I should say the initial conference was all the way back in 1973. So it's existed for a while. Mm-hmm. And it was something that originally Young Americans for Freedom was very involved in. John, Ronald Reagan gave the inaugural keynote speech in 1974.
Really? It's that old?
Yes. Yes. And literally it was his Shining City on a Hill speech was at the CPAC conference in 1974. So it has, to be fair, it has a long and storied tradition of being actually legitimately conservative until about the last 10 years.
Yeah. And in the last 10 years, it's become even more, and it's become ever more prominent, I feel like, over the last 10 years, where it's become prominent, but also like a little too bloated. Like you have speakers ranging from literally the president of the United States all the way down to a random guy who has a decent Twitter following. And like that's the wild sort of range of people who wind up speaking at CPAC.
Well, as an example, John, so in 2011, Trump actually gave a speech, and a lot of people credit that 2011 speech that Donald Trump gave with kind of kickstarting his career with the Republican Party, because before that, you know, he'd kind of flirted with maybe running as a Reform Party candidate.
Yeah.
I mean, but before that, he was also like a big Democrat donor.
Yeah. Or he had kind of given to everybody.
Yeah.
It's sort of in that businessman kind of trying to play both sides of the field deal.
But he you think like 2011, this is like, I think, kind of the height of the popularity of The Apprentice, and, you know, he goes and speaks here. But as you said, John, so you have everybody from Reagan to Trump, but then over the last several years, you had GOP Proud, a gay conservative group.
Yeah.
In 2014, you had American Atheists.
Mm-hmm.
And
so this is not necessarily a social conservative haven, necessarily.
Yes.
Okay.
And then in 2016, they invited Milo Yiannopoulos to speak.
Okay.
So it has had at best kind of a mixed record, questionable decisions on who they're inviting to speak and who they're not having speak.
Okay. All right. So. All right. So let me then kind of put in context what's going on here. So the conservative movement, for a long time, people have compared it to a kind of three-legged stool. All right. The three legs of the stool of conservative Republican politics were, for a long time, and this was the coalition that it really kind of coalesced around Nixon originally, and it brought Reagan to power. The lingering remains of it brought George W. Bush to power. It was basically people who were anti-communist hawks for foreign policy,
strong national defense,
and their backers. You had the business, fiscal, conservative, libertarian leaning crowd.
Howard Jarvis,
the Koch brothers, like all those kinds of people. And then you had social conservatives. And those were kind of the three legs of the stool that the conservative movement sort of relied upon. And the thing about those three legs is that the war hawks had money and political influence, but not a lot of voters. The business crowd, the pro-business crowd, had money and a lot of political influence, but not necessarily a lot of voters. The social conservatives had no money, but a lot of voters. And no money, the least influence, but the most voters. And as a result, pro-lifers, it's fair to say that the argument has been made many times that pro-lifers get short shrift in the conservative movement, that Republican presidents rely on pro-lifers to get elected and then don't deliver the goods when they're actually in office. You can see, I'll give you some examples of this. Their names are Anthony Kennedy, Sandra Day O'Connor, David Souter, and John Roberts. We get these presidents nominated and they appoint Supreme Court justices who are flippy-floppy at best and complete disasters at worst. So now, in the era of Trump, one of the things that I think it's fair to say, Jonathan, that we've seen in the conservative movement is that all of a sudden the Republicans had nominated a presidential candidate who was saying things that the pro-business community, the libertarian pro-business community, was not very happy with. Yes. Tariffs and anti-free trade and questioning all this free trade sort of orthodoxy. You had a president who was openly anti-war and frequently at odds with the foreign policy community.
Yes.
And so all he had, the only leg of the stool he had to stand on, and I think Trump realized this, were social conservative voters. And Trump was smart. He approached social conservatives as, I need your votes. So here's my list of potential Supreme Court appointments, which I know is the most important thing for you. Here's the list of people I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick from that list. He was able to pick 3 Supreme Court justices. He was able to replace Anthony Kennedy and Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Trump knew where his bread was buttered. And in this era of Trump, there's this realignment happening in conservative politics where we're not so much beholden to corporate interests and we're not so much beholden to foreign policy experts. And you'd think, particularly in a year when Roe v. Wade may well be overturned, that the conservative movement would embrace as sort of the core thing its social conservative elements. But no. So CPAC is basically saying, nah, we don't need any social conservatives to speak. We don't need any pro-lifers to speak at all at the biggest conservative conference of the year with all these conservative leaders, all these presidential candidates, all these senators, all these, I assume Trump is speaking at this thing. I don't know. Have all these people come.
He spoke. Ron
DeSantis is
spoke.
coming. Yeah, all the probably the 2 leading presidential candidates on the Republican side. And we're not going to talk about the pro-life issue. We have no speaker dedicated to talk about the pro-life issue. And I'll say this. I don't want, we don't view the pro-life issue as we don't think it should be the exclusive domain of the Republican Party or of conservatism. We would love it if both political parties were pro-life. We admire the work of pro-life Democrats. We're grateful for, Joe Manchin voting against horrible abortion legislation and things like that. But I think time and time again, we have been frustrated at when the Republican Party kind of treats pro-life voters, kind of takes them for granted and doesn't appreciate their work and doesn't appreciate the fact that they rely on them so much and kowtows to where How is it that every Republican administration can get taxes cut but can't defund Planned Parenthood? Can get taxes cut but can't, pass the Constitution's Protection Act? Can get corporate regulations slashed but can't get, X, Y, and Z priorities done? And I think it's just a question of priorities. I think it's a question of what is most important to people. How is it
John,
that we nominate these Supreme Court justices who are just dynamite when it comes to, having regulatory agency interpretation of law be less stringent and less powerful. Oh, they're rock solid there, but I feel like it's a 50-50 ball game if Roe's going to be overturned with these people.
Are you telling me that you feel like more drilling permits and natural gas exploration and fracking gets approved under Republican administrations than pro-life regulations get passed?
Yeah, I mean, like this idea that, and we'll talk about it later on in the show about some articles I've got from the New England Journal of Medicine about basically the efforts of the pro-choice side to basically try to override individual state laws when it comes to abortion pills. They're super aggressive, cutting all kinds of regulation when it comes to business, but when it comes to regulations around abortion pills, it's just nothing. The ratchet only goes one way. So now, CPAC has come under big heat for the fact that they don't have a single pro-life speaker this year in the year that Roe v. Wade might be overturned. That's the even crazier thing to me. Roe v. Wade is probably, I don't know, I'd put the odds at 80%, personally. I think there's an 80% chance Roe v. Wade's going to get overturned this June, and they don't have one speaker to talk about it.
Let me give you just one example, though, John.
Yeah.
Let's even say that it's a 50-50 chance that Roe v. Wade is going to get overturned.
At best.
At best.
At worst, it's a 50-50 shot.
Let's say it's 50-50.
Yeah.
You know what? One of the titles, literally, based on our friend Allison Centofonte from...
Live Action.
Was it Live Action? She's independent now, but yeah,
okay. So Allison Centofonte is a friend of mine and Jonathan's. She used to work for Alliance Defending Freedom. She used to work for Lila Rose at Live Action.
And she was on the Social and Cultural Planning Committee for CPAC.
So she has released this big tweet thread about this. Anyway, let's wrap up the segment with some of her thoughts.
So let me read real quick here, just a couple of the tweets real quick. I'm not going to read all of them, but I want to say, let's say it's best that it's a 50-50 chance that Roe is going to be overturned.
Okay.
She says, well, the committee I was on, there was not a single speaker or session on abortion. The planning committee never saw the final agenda. We saw the lineup when everyone else did. And she lists a couple of the CPAC 2022 titles. Lock Her Up for Real is the title of one of the sessions. John, what do you think the percentage chances that Hillary Clinton is going to go to jail?
Yeah. The odds of Hillary Clinton actually going to jail, lock her up, like we're going to spend... So CPAC has no time to discuss the overturning of Roe v. Wade, one of the most momentous things that's ever going to happen in the history of American politics in the 21st century. But we have time to still talk about, can we arrest Hillary Clinton? This is complete nonsense. We'll have more on this after the break. This is Right to Life Radio on Power Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in to Right to Life Radio. All right. We're discussing it's a minor issue, and I promise we'll get to more important issues. We've got some really actually cool stuff for the next segment. Cool in a bad way from the New England Journal of Medicine about efforts to basically override state laws limiting abortion pills. So stay tuned for that in the next segment. Right now we're discussing CPAC. Now CPAC, the biggest political conference in the country, the biggest conservative political conference in the country, all these great speakers, not one person focused on the abortion issue this year. And I cannot overstate this. If you're purporting to represent the conservative movement, and we were saying this at the end of the last segment, this year, Roe v. Wade is likely going to be overturned. Every state in the union will immediately become a battleground over the abortion question. All right? Immediately. So I cannot fathom how, if you're hosting a conservative political conference in 2022 and the biggest Supreme Court decision of my lifetime is coming up, actually, whichever way it goes, I think it's going to be the biggest Supreme Court decision of my lifetime, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's either that or Planned Parenthood versus Casey.
I mean, to be fair, Obergefell was a pretty big deal, too.
Obergefell was a big deal. Yeah. If this if Roe v. Wade is genuinely overturned, though, this is the biggest Supreme Court decision of my life. Yeah. And you're not going to talk about it? This issue that animates tens of millions of Americans, this issue that gets presidential nominees elected or not elected. I mean, why did Rudy Giuliani not become president of the United States in 2009? It's probably because he was pro-choice and he was trying to run as a Republican, and no one wanted to vote for a pro-choice Republican. End of story. It's such a key, crucial issue. And I'll say this. Obviously, everyone has their reason for why they get into politics. Everyone has their reason, their thing that animates them. Not everyone cares about every single thing equally. But I think it's fair to, obviously for us, the abortion issue is probably the chief reason why you and I care about politics at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And John, I want to chime in on this because not only Allison, but there's another person. I don't know if you've seen her on Twitter, Allie Beth Stuckey.
Yep. She's a host on
Blaze TV.
Blaze TV. And
she's
stuff
great.
Like that.
She's a young evangelical mom. She just had her second child. She's kind of like, and I say this with love and respect. This is not pejorative, but she's kind of a little bit like a female Ben Shapiro, kind of very fast talking and very conservative. Great gal. She did a talk or a podcast, and actually, I don't know if this was like a secret conspiracy coordination with Allison and Allie, but literally her podcast that she released yesterday was spilling the tea about CPAC.
Yeah.
And she mentions the fact that she was invited to speak twice, and henceforth and forevermore after that, she was not invited back to speak again.
Right.
And she basically goes through and talks about some back and forth conversations she'd had and then references this thing from Matt. She didn't reference Allison's tweet, so I think this podcast was recorded or published before Allison's tweet thread.
Yep.
But she makes the good point. She says, look, if the GOP is just going to be fiscal conservatism with a progressive twist, I'm out. I really have no great affinity for the grand old party. Like, if you're going to ditch social conservatives and particularly pro-lifers, what good are you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. As I said, we're in this. We're into politics because we care about the life issue, and there are millions of people throughout this country, probably most of our listeners, who that's not the only thing, but probably the key thing that animates them. I remember talking with someone who was running for a local office who was complaining that I'm just running for this local council seat and everyone asks me about my position on abortion. I have nothing to do with abortion. And I wanted to smack the guy because I was basically like, it's really freaking important. And stop pretending as if oh yes, my local position has nothing to do with abortion. Maybe it will.
And there's no way that they would be allowed to get away with that on any other issue.
No.
Imagine. Well, I don't know why everyone keeps asking me my position on wife beating. My position has nothing to do with wife beating.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, when we return, we're going to discuss some articles in the New England Journal of Medicine. They're panicking over the possible overturning of Roe v. Wade and ways in which they want to basically override various state laws to make abortion pills more accessible. That's next on Right to Life Radio. Right to Life Radio, thank you all for listening. Okay. Jonathan, it's a frequent thing we talk about here on this show, the most liberal rag, the most liberal publication in the United States of America, the most virulently pro-choice publication in the United States of America. What is it? Is it the Washington Post? Is it the New York Times?
Oh, man, this is a tough one.
Is it Soviet Weekly? No.
Pravda.
All wrong. The answer is the New England Journal of Medicine.
Ah, yes.
Now, I get access to the New England Journal of Medicine via the true shadow producer of this program and of the John Girardi Show, which is my mom, who
the
occasionally...
shadow producer of John Girardi himself. If you
Yeah,
think
well,
about it, so.
I mean, that was... I mean, it's pretty open that she's my mom. There's nothing shadowy about that. I don't have secret origins or anything. Anyway, so... My mom, my parents are both physicians. They get the New England Journal of Medicine. They've had issues of New England Journal of Medicine floating around my house for my whole life. And New England Journal of Medicine constantly hosts these op-ed pieces written by various doofuses to basically advocate for the most liberal social positions possible when there's any kind of social issue that somehow touches on the field of medicine. And in the most recent issue, the late February issue, I believe, they had 2 articles, one about training doctors to perform abortions, which was nonsense. It was written by a bunch of people who did not have MDs, first of all. It was seems like it was a bunch of recent college grads putting some kind of screed together. But the other big one that I want to highlight was a piece about the topic of abortion pills and abortion pill regulation. Now, Jonathan and I have covered this, I think, more than most pro-life outlets. That's why this is the finest pro-life, podcast in the country. President Biden's recent FDA deregulation of abortion pills. He issued temporary rules in March of 2020, I believe, very shortly after he was inaugurated, to get rid of some of the health and safety protocols around abortion pills. The key change being... it allows this change in regulations means you don't have to go to a clinic to take abortion pills. You can take the initial abortion pill, mifepristone, at home rather than in a clinical context. This is a huge deal, particularly for the pro-choice side. They want to eliminate any kind of barrier to abortion access. And if you have to drive to an abortion clinic, that's a barrier. If abortion pills can be just shipped to you through the mail, then every mailbox in America can become an abortion clinic. And this has been a long-time goal of the left to get rid of those health and safety regulations, really, since Trump took office, and they no longer had a friend in the White House. They've been wanting this change to occur. They were laying the groundwork for this, I think, during the Obama administration. Trump upset their plans. The Trump FDA would not approve this deregulation. And I knew in the 2020 election, I knew that this was, as the kids say, low-key, the most important issue of the 2020 election, because I think once abortion pills can be shipped through the mail and everyone can have access to abortion pills no matter what, you don't have to drive to an abortion clinic, you don't have to go to an abortion clinic, there's no room for pro-lifers to stand outside the abortion clinic or intercept people, anything.
Private, secret, secluded.
Exactly. And that leads to more health complications, it leads to more health problems, safety problems. But it fundamentally changes the whole face of abortion provision in this country forever if abortion pills can be shipped through the mail. And I don't think people, even in the pro-life movement, fully understood how radical a change that was. All right. We sort of knew if Trump won in 2020, those regulations would remain in place. If Biden won, those regulations would go away. And that was clear from the kinds of scientific advisors Biden was surrounding himself with, the influence that Planned Parenthood et al. Have with his administration. Well, look what happened. Biden won. He immediately issued temporary rules, getting rid of those restrictions in, I believe, March of 2021. The rule change became permanent in, I believe, December of 2021.
And John, I agree with you. I think that in the midst of everything else, now to be fair, we kind of were in the middle of COVID in 2020.
Yeah.
But this was a massively, even by pro-life standards, a massively undercovered story.
I agree.
I mean, there was a lot of talk about, we need to still talk about defunding Planned Parenthood. And then, of course, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died and Amy Coney Barrett was nominated, that sucked up all the air in the room.
That's really important. I'm not minimizing the importance of that stuff, but this changes the whole culture of how abortion gets provided in America in a way that's way more accessible.
And John, I'm gonna share a hot take.
Go for it.
And it relates to the first 2 segments of the show.
Yeah.
And I don't share this with any glee.
Yeah.
But I kind of think part of the reason why some of this discussion about RU-486 and abortion pills in particular sometimes gets buried is because the Matt Schlaps and the CPACs
The guy who
of
runs
the world,
CPAC, yeah.
they kind of think pro-lifers are icky.
Yeah.
They don't like to have to deal with
The very icky reality.
the very icky reality of abortion. They don't want to deal with, like, you guys are all like, you're super right wing and you're these single issue voters. And why can't we talk about owning the libs and all this other type of stuff?
Yeah.
And specifically, I hate to say this, but a lot of times when you look at how a lot of these national conservative organizations, not explicitly pro-life organizations, like Susan B. Anthony List,
yeah,
great
they're super
organization.
pro-life. Yeah, that's
Alliance
their
Defending Freedom, amazing.
Yeah.
Live Action, Students for Life, they're all great. But when you look at these ones that try to kind of be the big conservative tent that everyone falls underneath, they really get uncomfortable when you start moving beyond third trimester abortion or 20-week abortion bans.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, well,
because they're not that socially conservative, probably. No. A lot of the people running them. Yeah.
And in their mind, like, I don't want to say they're fine with abortion, chemical abortion.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing of like, yeah, but if chemical abortions are all first trimester abortion, it's not a surgical thing. It feels like it's less icky. People constantly confuse the abortion pill with the morning after pill, which are two completely different things. Anyway, the New England Journal of Medicine article in question here is advocating to get rid of state laws that limit sending abortion pills through the mail. Now, to combat this federal deregulation of abortion pills, a number of state legislatures have passed laws banning the shipment of abortion pills through the mail. And what this article in the New England Journal of Medicine is arguing is, quite simply, the new FDA regulations that get rid of those health and safety standards are now actually in conflict with those state laws. Those state laws that limit abortion pills from being sold are actually, they conflict now with the federal FDA regulations. And so what they're arguing is that basically the federal FDA regulations should override those individual state laws, and the state laws should be declared to be basically preempted is the sort of legal word, the federal preemption. So basically, if you have a federal law and a state law about the same subject at the same time, the same way, and the federal government has authority over it, and the two laws disagree with each other, the federal law preempts the state law, okay? And so they're saying the FDA regulations allow abortion pills to be shipped through the mail. The state laws don't allow it. The federal law should override, and we should overturn all these state laws limiting mailing abortion pills. Now, this would also be disastrous. So, and this is the thing. This stuff just doesn't just kind of accidentally show up in the New England Journal of Medicine. The people who write these things are connected. They're connected with Planned Parenthood. They're connected with all these people. And stuff that you see in the New England Journal of Medicine winds up coming true in the form of public policy actions by the left.
John, surely an entire political party, or in some cases both political parties, surely they wouldn't just completely wholesale turn over all of their domestic policy agenda to well-credentialed, nice, short Italian doctors who get up in front of a podium every day.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
even even one who plays a banjo. I mean, surely they would never do that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like Francis Collins or Anthony Fauci. Yes, exactly. So this is my fear. If this is showing up in the New England Journal of Medicine, I will make the John Girardi prediction that the Biden Department of Justice is going to initiate lawsuits against, and I bet this is going to happen particularly after Roe v. Wade. After Roe v. Wade is overturned, all these states are going to have laws banning distributing abortion pills, limiting abortion pills, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be a flurry of lawsuits coming from the Department of Justice, and this will be one of the topics covered, okay, because they're freaked out. The pro-choice side is freaked out that here they got this big victory for letting abortion pills be shipped through the mail. They're super excited about that, but they're about to lose Roe v. Wade, and they're going to see a whole bunch of states outlaw abortion. And the way to get around, and this is key. If Texas outlaws abortion, how do you get around it? you let abortion pills be shipped through the mail to Texas. And that's going to be their point of attack. They're going to basically say, okay, well, Texas has banned abortion, but they can't ban shipping abortion pills through the mail. So everyone in Texas, just order your abortion pills from out of state. The FDA regulations say that it's fine. You can't have state law, contradicting FDA regulations. So have abortion pills be shipped into Texas. That's what's going to happen. That's going to be the attempt, anyway, on the part of the left. So I just looking into this crystal ball, come June, the Supreme Court's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Biden administration will be all huffy. They'll issue a bunch of statements saying this is horrible and we're going to challenge some aspects of this. We're going to see over a course of about a month or two, probably some state legislatures will have emergency sessions to outlaw abortion or beef up abortion, whatever. And I'd bet probably by... See, now I wonder how the election plays into this. I bet sometime around September, the Biden team will want to jazz up the base, his Democrat base. He'll file a whole bunch of lawsuits, have the Department of Justice file a whole bunch of lawsuits, probably around September of 2022. This is just my prediction.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm just gaming this out. But I think that's what's going to happen. Now, we're going to end this segment a little early. When we return, I want to discuss the ability that pro-choicers have to use the administrative state in ways that pro-lifers have not been able to so use. More on this when we return. I'll explain more after the break. This is Right to Life Radio on Power Talk. Thank you so much for listening to Right to Life Radio, a production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. Our golf tournament's coming up on Monday, April 25th.
Ooh.
We have openings available for golfers. I think we should have the info up on our website pretty soon if you want to play.
Can you remind me, John, is it Copper River, Fort Washington? Where is
Fort
it
Washington.
Fort Washington.
Fort Washington, yeah.
All right.
So I'll always enjoy. It's always a fun day, the golf tournament. So anyway, check that out if you're interested, rtlcc.org. All right. I want to talk about the administrative state, which that's a prelude to a really boring conversation usually, but hear me out. All right.
Hey, baby, you want to talk about the administrative state?
Hey, girl. I see you. Saw you across the way in my admin law class at law school. Thought I'd ask you out. All right. We talk about pill abortion. Okay, abortion pills. We've been discussing that throughout the show. How did abortion pills become legal in the United States of America? How did the FDA get it? How did the FDA get it approved? The tale of the legalization of abortion pills in the United States is one of consistent, diligent, intelligent, forward progress by Democrat administrations and Democrat-led FDAs, and total inaction by Republican administrations and Republican FDAs. All right, from 1993 to January 2001, Bill Clinton worked assiduously. He and his FDA worked assiduously to bring abortion pills over to America. Abortion pills were invented, I believe, in France. They were first used in France. And it took Clinton 8 years of diligent work at the FDA, working with the Ford Foundation to help sponsor it, to bring it over, working with different medical people. All this tireless, intelligent work in the administrative state to bring abortion pills over. What then happened in the 8 years that George W. Bush was president? Nothing. No movement to roll it back. No movement to impose new restrictions on it, to outlaw it. Nothing. It was 8 years of inactivity.
And John, again, I'm going to be a broken record today.
Yeah.
But this is a huge frustration that very often the left, when they are in power, they wield every lever at their disposal.
Yep. They get their stuff done.
And meanwhile, you and I have been back in Washington, D.C. the week of the March for Life before, And if we're at an event, I won't name any specific organizations because I know these organizations are frustrated too.
Yeah.
But we will have someone come and speak to us at a small gathering of pro-life leaders, and we will have someone from. Again, I don't want to name a specific legislator, but at the time, we would have someone from the pro-life caucus in the Senate or the House, or a leading legislative aide come and say, "Well, we want to let you know
we're working on this.
We've scheduled a vote,
for
this
on some
piece
bill
of
that's
legislation.
some bill that's never going to pass." And then you'll have pro-life presidents who seemingly have only given it the March for Life's coming up. I guess we got to issue some executive orders that won't do anything, that make it sound like we're really doing a bunch on life. And then they'll issue some phony baloney executive orders that don't really do anything.
Or in George W. Bush's case, I mean, God bless him. There's a lot of reasons to appreciate George W. Bush.
Sure.
But I'll make a phone call.
I'll make a phone call to the March for Life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
now unfortunately my hands are tied. I wasn't able to actually accomplish anything on the pro-life front this year.
So
but
8 years, Bush does nothing to roll back regulations, to reimpose more regulations on abortion pills. 8 years of Obama loosening regulations more, laying the groundwork. 4 years of Trump, no movement. I mean, the Republican presidents don't make things worse, but they don't do anything.
This is what we talk about, folks.
And then Biden comes into office, and in 1 year, abortion pills can be shipped through the mail.
When you hear pro-lifers complain that abortion policy is so often a one-way ratchet, it's like a socket wrench.
It's because of stuff like this.
Yeah.
I mean, George W. Bush, the head of HHS, was Tommy Thompson, who I believe was pro-choice. So the HHS, which oversees the FDA, and what was George W. Bush more concerned about? Well, he was a lot more concerned with privatizing Medicare. So I mean, the personnel is policy. So George W. Bush does that. Trump leaves in, an obvious exhibit of something that every Trump supporter would agree was a mistake on Donald Trump's part, was leaving guys like Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins in their positions when Trump came into office. These guys were who had been in their positions for a long time, obvious liberals, had been working for the federal government for a long time, and Trump kept them in. And Trump kept them in part because loser Republican politicians would say to Trump,
"Oh, well, Francis Collins is a good guy, you know. Oh, Anthony Fauci, he's a good guy. He's a real expert. You know, he's been around for decades. He was there when Reagan was president."
Like, find me a president who, I also don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, that every Republican president since Reagan has been a non-lawyer, and every Democrat president since that time has been a lawyer. And shockingly, these lawyer Democrat presidents are much better at getting the administrative state to bend to their will than all of our non-lawyer Republican presidents are. I don't think that's a total coincidence. I'm not saying non-lawyers can't be president, but it is a legal job. Whether you are a lawyer or not, it is a legal job. Your words and actions have legal effect. So, find me a pro-life president who will bend the enormous apparatus of the federal regulatory state to his will. And I'll quit this job to be his butler. That's what I'm saying. All right, with that, let the moon hit your eye like a big pizza pie. That's Amore. That's Right to Life Radio. We'll see you next week.